or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor. Okay? I would like to make a deal, you know, these, and and by the way, I'm a fan of Denmark too. I have to tell you, and you know, they've been very nice to me. I'm a big fan, but you know, the fact that they had a boat land there 500 years ago doesn't mean that they own the land. I'm sure we had lots of boats go there also. But we need that because if you take a look outside of Greenland right now, there are Russian destroyers, there are Chinese destroyers and bigger. There are Russian submarines all over the place. We're not going to have Russia or China occupy Greenland, and that's what they're going to do if we don't. So we're going to be doing something with Greenland, either the nice way or the more difficult way. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security, and Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you.
I think it's a big combination.
You know what Denmark did recently to boost up security in Greenland? They added one more dog sled. It's true. They thought that was a great move.
Greenland is an ally to the US and is also covered by the NATO alliance, and that is a big difference. So we therefore completely stand by Greenland, and in no ways do we see a possible comparison with what happened.
Und da Dänemark der NATO angehört, wird auch Grönland prinzipiell von der NATO zu verteidigen sein. Und wenn es dort weitere Erfordernisse gibt, die Verteidigungsanstrengungen bezüglich Grönlands zu verstärken, dann werden wir das im Rahmen der Allianz miteinander zu besprechen haben.
Greenland. NATO is just over. That's what Denmark's warning. And now some Danish officials also have an idea of how Trump might pull off taking Greenland so that Europe is powerless to resist. Right, according to reports, they think that Trump could make a late-night Truth Social post declaring that the island is a U.S. protectorate, which would technically still classify it as an autonomous state, but would give Trump the justification to protect it militarily. But also, like, here's the thing, that the U.S. can already do literally whatever it wants on the island. There's a whole treaty about it. And the U.S. does whatever it wants on the island. And as of recently, that is to remove 10,000 troops off the island and then complain about the lack of military forces on the island. And if Trump, he cares so much about Greenland's defenses, he can go send troops there now, and Danish lawmakers have even said as much. Also, Denmark has spent an additional $10 billion on defense, all of which went straight to the American military-industrial complex. But you have many kind of saying that none of the nuances of foreign policy seem to matter to an administration that appears to be run by chuds for chuds. And with all this, you had all of Western and Northern Europe releasing a joint statement backing Denmark and Greenland's sovereignty. France's army even posted on Twitter a photo of their soldiers in the snow with the caption, "Need reinforcements?" And in the end, it looks like Trump's walking the United States towards a war with Europe, and for what? To control an island that we already control? All just for President Newsom to give the island back on his first day?
Hi guys, on Greenland. I see the family Miller is now big on Greenland, and this Mrs. Miller, the wife of Mr. Miller, two completely confused personalities from the American right. They have, one is a podcaster, the deputy chief of staff of the White House. Both seem to hate Europe and to hate everybody, and I don't know what, I don't care for them, but Greenland is ours, it's Europe. I agree. We should have changed the status of Greenland, and this is a typical European problem because we never change anything, we never improve anything, we just leave it as it is until Trump breaks it, and that's our problem, of course, because the status of Greenland as a de facto colony of Denmark was never very reasonable. Of course, a country like Greenland should be a full member of the European Union, or at least a full member of Denmark as a federal state of Denmark or something like this. And of course, they should be fully in the EU, fully in the Euro, fully in the OECD, and a full member of the West. Yeah? And the whole thing as an independent state or as a region of Denmark. But this kind of leftover of colonial times is never very good. And Trump is now crashing the system. And then we see that we, the non-changing, always status quo related Europeans are fucked up, basically. And now he wants to take it. Of course he cannot take it. And I say, if you take it, we take every single base of the Americans from Aviano to Ramstein, from Romania to all the other military bases will be confiscated and you will lose it. And the whole position of American power since World War II, for which so many Americans were dying and so many trillions were spent in order to have American Europe, and we love it. We say thank you for liberation for the Nazis and from the Soviets to keep us safe, and for the liberation of Europe. That was all for America. Thank you very much. But if you take Greenland, you have to leave. It's very simple, Mrs. Miller. This is the leverage we have. You need the spaces for global power projection. You won't have it. And we can defend ourselves very well, and we will do that without the US nuclear shield, without the US troops in Europe, without the American bases. We will simply run these bases ourselves, and we run your boys home into Chicago, yeah, and Ohio. And goodbye. If you want war, we are ready, and that's definitely something we will win. Europe is for eternal, and we will also defeat the challenge of Putin and of Trump. And if you go extreme, we go extreme as well, Mrs. Miller. Be sure about it. You're European patriots. All the best, Mrs. Miller. Bye.
All right, so let's start this broadcast with some breaking inputs that have in fact come in, where the American President Donald Trump has expressed his doubts over the NATO alliance. On his Truth Social post, the American president has said that Washington was paying for the NATO bills since they were at 2% GDP. Furthermore, he said, and I quote him here, "Without my involvement, Russia would have all of Ukraine right now. Remember also, I single-handedly ended 8 wars, and Norway, a NATO member, foolishly chose not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize. But that doesn't matter. What does matter is that I saved millions of lives. Russia and China have zero fear of NATO without the United States, and I doubt that NATO would be there for the United States if we really needed them." Now, Trump's renewed threats to seize Greenland from the NATO member Denmark have rattled the transatlantic alliance. Leaders of 6 NATO nations joined with Mette Frederiksen, the Prime Minister of Denmark, to issue a remarkable joint statement pushing back against Donald Trump's assertions that the United States should take over Greenland. All right, now joining us on the broadcast, we've got our correspondent Susan Tehrani, who's joining us live from New York. Susan, this is an interesting statement by Donald Trump on the NATO military alliance. This is something that he said over and over again. Is there a decision by Donald Trump that we expect on the NATO military alliance?
It's hard to imagine that President Trump would go as far as making a decision one way or the other regarding NATO as being part of NATO. But the part that he says that I doubt that NATO would be with us if anything should happen to us, I mean, the biggest incident in recent history and contemporary history is after the United States was attacked on 9/11 and the way NATO allies rallied behind the president. And so it appears that this is in reaction to the statement that NATO member states have made regarding the Trump administration's desire to acquire Greenland. But nonetheless, it is concerning. And it is, again, very on brand that it appears that the Trump administration and the president himself seems to want to go at things alone, unilaterally, as opposed to a multilateral setting. But it's hard to imagine that they've made any kind of decision regarding NATO. It seems more as a reaction to how NATO member states have reacted. Some of them even, like France, for example, the way in the manner that Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro was brought to the United States, for example.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Susan Tehrani, for joining us with those updates there.
What do you make of what's going on now, Ambassador? Oh, Ben, like, where do you start? But at first, I'm going to start. I mean, look, I feel so passionately about this. The first thing that I'm struck by is obviously, so there's a couple of words that come to mind: reckless, clueless, a complete misunderstanding of history, a complete misunderstanding of the way NATO works. So let me just start with this. He makes the argument about national security. He says that Greenland is going to become Russian or Chinese if we don't take it. Well, that misunderstands how NATO works, because honestly, in fact, NATO was formed in part to avoid something like this from ever having to happen. Because if Greenland were, God forbid, attacked by an adversary, invaded by an adversary, let's say the Russians, the entire alliance, Article 5 would be invoked, and the entire alliance would be compelled to respond. And so, in essence, whether Greenland is under Danish control or American control, it actually makes no difference from an American national security standpoint. The NATO alliance is based on this idea that our national security, the alliance's national security, is universal, that it's the same. So in essence, the whole argument falls apart. I also don't believe that that's real. I don't believe that that is in any way part of his desire here. But and not only that, it goes further than that, Ben. And this is why, is that anyone who is crazy enough to argue that national security, that the national security of the United States would be strengthened by taking a stake to the heart of NATO, arguably the best alliance the modern world has ever seen. You take a stake to the heart of NATO, I guarantee you this. What two things happen automatically? Russia and China are empowered, and two, the entire Western alliance is less safe because of that. So it is anyone who has any national security experience would tell you that that argument is bogus, flawed, incredibly naive, and more than that, like legitimately clueless, and doesn't understand a chapter of a history book.
Alors, vaste sujet, et au fond, il pourrait y avoir un côté complètement naïf, irénique, à vous dire qu'on va s'occuper de la gouvernance internationale au moment où je suis en train de vous dire que c'est le désordre le plus grand, la loi du plus fort, et que chaque jour les gens se demandent si le Groenland va être envahi, si le Canada sera soumis à la menace de devenir le 51e État ou autre, ou si Taïwan sera encerclé davantage. Les États-Unis sont une puissance établie mais qui se détourne progressivement de certains de ses alliés et s'affranchit de règles internationales qu'elle promouvait encore récemment, qu'il s'agisse du commerce, de certains éléments de sécurité ou de certaines enceintes.
The messages that we hear regarding Greenland are extremely concerning, and we have had discussions also among the Europeans. If this is a real threat, and if it is, then what would be our response?
Es ist vollkommen klar, über das Schicksal Grönlands entscheiden die Grönländerinnen und Grönländer und das Königreich Dänemark, zu dessen Hoheitsgebiet Grönland gehört. Die in der UN-Charta festgeschriebenen Prinzipien der Souveränität, der territorialen Integrität und der Unverletzlichkeit der Grenzen müssen eingehalten werden.